count up a few seconds for Cecil. I was telling Matt, and I'll tell the good people who are here, I was telling John, Matt, that I finally got my internet upgraded. Thank you, everybody out there, for bearing with me, including all of my gracious co-hosts and guests. So hopefully this will go better today. And I appreciate everybody for your patience. We appreciate your patience, too, on the IDP Roundtable. There's not a lot of top-notch IDP content out there. We had a couple of weeks off for Thanksgiving, being on assignment. Now we are back. What is going on with Isaiah Simmons? That more this week on the IDP Roundtable. John Norton, just when we thought we could trust Isaiah Simmons, we can't trust Vance Joseph. What sense can we make out of this?
I'm just trying to figure out what the heck they're waiting for in Arizona to get this guy on the field. I mean, so far, the only time they put him in the game and actually let him play was the week I was playing Bob Henry in one of our leagues that we're in. He went large enough to beat me that week. The guy, he makes tackles, he makes big plays, he gets to the quarterback, he does just about anything and everything on the field, in the box scores. Yet, for whatever reason, they seem to refuse to give him more than 30 or 40 snaps per game at most. I'm just a little puzzled here. Obviously, with 3 weeks to go in the fantasy season, he's not somebody we're going to be able to trust this year, but we've seen enough of him just in what we have seen with the snaps that he has had to work with that this guy is going to be special once he finally gets on the field full time. I have no idea what they're thinking in Arizona, why they aren't making that move quicker. But we have to assume that by next year, the guy's a first-round pick. Why you're not putting him on the field and getting what you can out of him quicker, I don't understand. But you got to assume that by next year he's going to be a full-time guy. The only thing we really got to figure out there is at whose expense that's going to be. Hicks is probably going to be, in my opinion, the odd man out, although I think Simmons is probably a better fit at the weak inside spot that Devondre Campbell's been playing. We'll have to see how that pans out. But we've definitely gotten enough tease out of him to know what we can expect going forward. So if you can get your hands on him this year, redraft leagues, put him high on your list going into next year. Good guy to save for the carryover.
It's been more than one season in one season for Arizona, for our fantasy teams, and for the Seattle defense. Matt Schauf, very professional. I feel like you're reporting to us from the Beirut Bureau or wherever you are. If Seattle's defense was beleaguered, and Carlos Dunlap's arrival helped revive them, what do we have to look forward to, though? It's Jets week. We want to play our pass rushers against the Jets. What are we going to have with Carlos Dunlap?
Matt Schauf on the scene here in Western New York, where we're all on the watch for Josh Allen passes at all times so that we can use our heads. So Seattle, the Carlos Dunlap injury, I got to say, I underrated last week. He's been in the 70% playing time range since he joined the Seahawks and been productive. I mean, as soon as he got there, he started producing for him. The pass rush has been good overall since he got there. Then he had a foot injury, was on the injury report last week. And he pulled through and he played in the game despite not practicing any of the days last week. And I was like, okay, he's playing the Giants. Let's just go ahead and trust him. Shouldn't have, because the past 2 weeks, Carlos Dunlap played 54% and then 41% in that game where he missed all the practice leading up to the game. And you got to figure, if a guy practices none of the days, is questionable, and then plays, there's definitely more risk than usual. And especially this time of year, I think you have to take that into account, because one wrong play can get you knocked out. So we're going to have to watch Carlos Dunlap's foot this week. He did not practice again today, so it's definitely not all the way back. We'll see about the participation in the next couple of days. I mean, like you said, we want to be able to use him, but you're going to have to factor in the risk if you're deciding between Carlos Dunlap and some other defensive ends.
And we also have folks should know that the Guru is an old school Raiders fan and a Bengals fan, repping both of your teams today, John. Let's talk Raiders. Let's talk Raiders linebacker, because I feel like since we haven't been here for a couple weeks, something has happened with the Raiders linebackers. It feels like every week we have something to talk about. They gave Corey Littleton that big contract. We've also seen Nicholas Morrow making some plays here. Nick Kwiatkowski has been doing better. Is there a second linebacker? What's going on with the other inside linebacker spot in the Raiders defense?
Well, Littleton's just not working out for him the way they expected that he was going to. I mean, they gave him 100% of the playing time early in the season. For several games, he never really was able to produce. He was doing all right in coverage and so forth, but not putting up the tackles, not making the big plays, which is what they expected from him. He missed a couple of games with an injury, and since he's come back, he's played less than 60% of the snaps in each of the last 2 games, and quite frankly been very much outplayed by Mr. Morrow out there. And him and Kwiatkowski are now seeing 100% of the snaps. Nick Morrow is producing well, playing well, much better than anticipated. And I have a sneaky suspicion that Littleton is going to continue to see much less than a full workload, especially if Morrow continues to play the way he has. There's no reason for them to take him off the field. He's getting the job done for him. Is there any hope for Littleton going forward? I would say probably not this year. We'll see if something changes between now and next year. But from the way it looks, the way he's played, he's just either not fitting in with the defensive scheme as well as they had hoped, or he's just a product of the scheme that he was in with the Rams that made him look better than what he actually is. We've had almost a full season now to see that, and we keep waiting for him to come around, and he just hasn't come around at all. In fact, if anything, he's gotten worse. I'm starting to cut him, and even in some of my dynasty leagues at this point, I've given up that much on him, and pretty much time to move on, in my opinion.
And they don't always work out, as Littleton was like a top 10 pick in many redraft leagues. Matt, let's drive through the desert, California desert, from Vegas to Los Angeles. If we haven't got together for a couple of weeks, there's probably a Chargers linebacker update, the moving target. I don't know how much we could learn in a 45-0 loss, but where are we at with them?
I mean, first of all, congratulations if you stuck with Kenneth Murray and played him last week, because you finally got the payoff from it, and has not been there all year. He played every snap against the Patriots for the first time since week 8. He had 14 tackles, 12 of those solos. The 14 tackles were more than Kenneth Murray had in the previous 2 weeks combined. The 12 solos matched his previous 4 games combined. So again, that production was way out of line with what he's done in general. Obviously, the Patriots, their run-heavy ways helped that, and being on the field a lot. Kaiser White has been on the COVID list for 3 straight games now, which is longer than most guys have stayed out for that this year. So we'll see whether he's back this week. Kaiser White has not topped 3 solos in a game, though, since week 5. So even if he returns, I don't know that I'm looking to play him. I think it would just cut into Kenneth Murray's playing time, and we should certainly bet on Kenneth Murray not playing as much as he did last week. Nick Vigil has, of course, been Nick Vigil. When he's on the field, he makes tackles. He's just not that good at football, so he can't stay on the field when other people are healthy. 8 and 9 tackles the past 2 games. He played 66%. 2 weeks ago, 91% this past week when he got the start, with both White and Denzel Perryman out. So if both of those guys remain out this week, then Nick Vigil's got some LB3 potential to him. I mean, like I said, he tends to make tackles when he's on the field, but we'll have to watch both White and Perryman. Perryman didn't practice at all last week with his back injury, and then was doubtful before not being in the game. So we'll see about him. I wouldn't bet on Denzel Perryman playing this week. But again, multiple linebackers to watch, a situation that has not been fruitful for us in general. So the best path is to not trust any of these guys. But if you're in a deeper league, chance Nick Vigil helps you, chance Kenneth Murray helps you.
Facing Atlanta this week. And speaking of this week, it is week 14, fantasy playoffs, if they weren't already underway. And let me tell you, John, I have Justin Houston on a couple of teams, and I stared at him. I think in the league we were together, one of the leagues together, I picked up Jabal Sheard, which really worked out. Jabal Sheard was fine because I was afraid of taking a 0. Justin Houston was not a 0 last week. He was a week winner.
He was not.
He was a week winner. So what do we do with Justin Houston? I mean, maybe the answer is easy in week 15 since he gets the Texans again. This week it is those Raiders. What's the next step if you have Justin Houston?
Well, here's the strange roller coaster that Houston's been on. Beginning of the season, he started off hot, 9 tackles, 2 assists, 3.5 sacks over the first 4 games. Then he kind of vanished for 5 games, did almost nothing. Kept showing up on the practice participation report as limited or not practicing, but they kept listing him with a non-injury situation. So no reason to think that he was really hurt. The guy's almost 32 years old, so they're just giving him some rest to keep him fresh. But like I said, for 5 games in a row, he does nothing. Then all of a sudden, he starts showing up again. Over the last 3 games, he has 8 tackles, 1 assist, 4 sacks, 3 of them this past week, a forced fumble this past game, and he's just blowing up again. So I don't know if whatever was bothering him, whatever the problem was, is all of a sudden gotten right. If he's rested enough where he can, start putting up numbers like he did in his younger days, or exactly what's going on here. But he's been very streaky, hot early, cold in the middle, hot again now. Question is he going to stay hot through our playoffs? It's definitely something to think about, definitely something to make you nervous. I went ahead and picked him up again in a couple of leagues this week. I had him in a couple of leagues and let him go earlier when he was playing so poorly or not putting up any points. So I'm a little kind of lost with what the track is going to be here. I'd like to think that he's going to pick it back up again. Like you mentioned, he gets Texans again week after this. So that's another good matchup for him. You have to think that after he has 3 sacks against them, the Texans will do something differently with their blocking scheme to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I don't know that I would count on a big game like that. At this point in a playoff matchup, I'm going to look at what my situation is. If I'm an underdog and I need to take some chances, we know that he has a lot of upside. He might pitch a 0 out there or not do very much one week, but he has, there's very good possibility he could blow up again. So I would take that on a per case basis. If you've got somebody you can put in there that is going to get you good points, that is a lot more consistent and dependable, and you're not an underdog, maybe roll with that guy. If you need to stretch it a little bit or you're hurting and willing to take a chance and gamble a little bit for the bigger play, I think the upside is there for him. But it's a low floor, high ceiling situation this week. I would probably play the odds on him having a pretty decent week just because he's been on that hot streak at this point.
Matt, I want to let you know it's not just me. Brian Sumner, great friend of the show, says, we're really going to allow that level of professionalism. You're making us look bad with your new background there. Let's mash together a couple of things we've already talked about and come up with a third topic here, Matt, because we've talked about Corey Littleton and how much he got out of that role with the Rams. And through injuries, now we've seen Troy Reeder in there. And also you just talked about the Chargers and how there was a big tackle opportunity for Kenneth Murray last week. That's who the Rams are going to get this week. And we can go ahead and throw Alex Singleton in there. And Alex Singleton, I think, is a terrific example of how quickly things change in the IDP world. I feel very confident that he was on the radar of exactly 0 IDP analysts at the beginning of the season. And in fact, it was his pick 6 when he was getting very little playing time, and none of the other Eagles linebackers were really stepping up that put him on our radar. But it took a few weeks for him to get there. Here we have tackle monsters. Singleton this week going against New Orleans. That sounds good. Again, Reeder going against New England. What can you tell us about these guys as people we weren't planning on trusting in the playoffs, Matt? But the playoffs are here. Are we trusting them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, is the answer to that to begin with. And Alex Singleton wasn't even on the Eagles' radar to begin the season. I mean, their opening linebackers were Nathan Jerry was ahead of him. TJ Edwards was ahead of him. Duke Riley was ahead of him. So it's not like somebody that we all missed. It's somebody who had opportunity come to him, and he has seized it. One of the few Eagles who has actually seized opportunity this year. But Alex Singleton is doing it. He has played every single defensive snap over the past 4 weeks. That's the 4 games since Philadelphia's bye. He leads the entire NFL in tackles over that span with 45 total tackles, 12 plus tackles, 8 plus solos in 3 of those 4 games. So he has definitely been delivering. He is somebody to trust this week. He is top 5 in my linebacker rankings for this week against New Orleans, the run-heavy New Orleans Saints, which only helps provide tackle opportunities for Alex Singleton this week. And then Troy Reeder, same thing. His opportunity came along to him way back in, I think it was week 5. He got his first start when Micah Kiser was out with a groin injury. And Troy Reeder popped up out of nowhere. We weren't sure going into the game who was going to get the most playing time at inside linebacker for the Rams. Troy Reeder had 11 tackles and 3 sacks in that game against Washington. Kiser came back, so we kind of forgot about him. Then Kiser went down again. He's on IR right now. Reeder had 15 tackles, 12 solos in the second game that Kiser missed. He had 10 tackles and a pass breakup last week. So all 3 of the starts that Troy Reeder has made in place of Micah Kaiser have included double-digit tackles for him. It's got the Bucs this week, so it's not an awesome matchup for linebacker scoring, but I mean, it's kind of tough to bet against somebody who's doing that much, especially for a Bucs team that isn't as much of a downfield passing threat as it was with Jameis Winston. So I think there's enough around to keep Troy Reeder well within starting range this week. Not as high as Alex Singleton, but I'm starting both of these guys in most cases in my IDP lineup.
Yet another name, John, that was not on anyone's radar, Robert Spillane, and now he's off our radar because he's hurt. He was making a play on the play he got hurt. We miss him already. So who are we looking at here as the new full-time linebacker? Who's going to get the green dot? Vince Williams or new acquisition, Avery Williamson?
Well, Vince Williams got it during the game after Spillane left. And because Williamson is relatively new to the team, I would be surprised if they were to give him the dot. That doesn't necessarily dictate how the playing time is going to break down, however. Vince Williams, even though he was wearing a dot and calling the plays in most situations, was not on the field for every snap, even after Spillane left. He was on there for the vast majority of them, but he hit the sideline on a couple of situations as well. I think we're going to see a lot of both of these guys. We know that Williamson is the better coverage linebacker. I think he's going to, I would say he's probably the most likely to be the full-time every down guy if either one of these guys plays every snap in the game. And I also feel like he has the higher floor of the two as far as IDP production goes. He had 6 tackles and 3 assists this last game. Brian Williams had 1 tackle and maybe 4 assists or some kind of a strange stat line like that. We know that Williams is a solid pass rusher. We also know that he tends to struggle a little bit in coverage. So Williamson is a little more balanced in that area. How this is going to break down for the rest of the year as far as full-time play is still kind of up in the air. I think both of these guys are going to have some value. Spillane's expected to miss some time. They haven't really put a number on it, but with only 3 games to go in the fantasy season, I would say we may not see him again until it's all over, probably next year, back in his backup role. If I was going to roll with either of these guys at this point, I would go with Williamson, just because I feel like the floor is a little higher and the tackle numbers are going to be a little more consistent going forward. I feel more comfortable counting on him, but I would have to say that Williams has the higher ceiling because of the big play potential.
And watch out for Ulysses Gilbert, who's pretty athletic. They just activated him off of IR. He would have been the backup inside linebacker going into the year, and his injury opened up the opportunity for Spillane. Speaking of injuries, Matt, let's go over a few other injuries. If you weren't paying attention right before kickoff, you might have missed that Eric Kendricks hurt himself in warm-ups, apparently, a calf injury. Didn't practice today. Blake Martinez, another big name in IDP circles. And then Donovan Wilson, and we've been chronicling his every other week, I guess if you include the bye week, figuring out how to when to time playing him. The injuries might make that easier to know, but not in a good way. Give us the injury update.
Yeah. Can I say first, as a fan of names, I hope Ulysses Gilbert's in there because I'm always for a player who's named like an American gladiator.
And a president.
Those injuries are definitely worth watching. Blake Martinez left with a back injury in that surprising win over the Seahawks. Tay Crowder picked up the most playing time among inside linebackers. He spent a stretch on IR in the middle of the season, but was up over 70% playing time against Seattle, put up some usable numbers in that game. If there's no Blake Martinez, I would have to bet on Tay Crowder playing the most snaps this week against Arizona, potentially being usable. He'd probably be in like the 30 to 40 range at linebacker for me, depending on the scoring system and who exactly is around him. Have some upside, but not a guy that we should definitely trust, even with Blake Martinez out. The Devontae Downs is the other guy in consideration, but it looks like Tay Crowder would play more snaps. He was in the lineup, I believe, before Downs earlier this season, again, before his injury. It's a little tough to remember for sure at this point. The Eric Kendricks injury was a killer for IDP last week. In pre-games, was still active for the game, but did not play a snap. Todd Davis played in his place, played every snap, put up a totally Todd Davis line with 3 solos and 8 assists. I mean, if that helps you, then Todd Davis is usable. It looks like he would play if Eric Kendricks is out again, but we'll have to watch the calf injury for Eric Kendricks this week. Keep the Carlos Dunlap thing in mind. If somebody doesn't practice all week and then is questionable on the weekend, don't just trust that they're going to play their normal snap count. And Donovan Wilson, the last one, the safety for the Cowboys, had a groin injury, missed the Tuesday night game. Then it was Darian Thompson filling in, played every snap in his stead. So if Donovan Wilson's out this week, Darian Thompson in against the Bengals. I'm not sure if the Bengals can stay on the field long enough to support Darian Thompson, but there's some upside against Brandon Allen if that is the case. And certainly if Donovan Wilson's back, there's upside for him. He's already shown that he can get home for a sack here and there. So there's more upside in that category too if his groin's better for this matchup.
John giving us the
I thought Blake Martinez came back into the game after he went out. And they said that the back injury wasn't all that serious, but maybe they're just resting him a little bit this week. Hopefully he'll be able to get back out there. But I was pretty sure that I saw him get back on the field after he left for a little while in that one.
Yeah, we'll watch that and Kendricks, by the way, and this is another reason to be an IDP fantasy football player. If Kendricks is out, Rob Gronkowski, that's your DFS tight end this week. And that great Minnesota, best matchup of the week, I think, Minnesota, Tampa Bay. We're talking about lots of things setting your lineups in the playoffs. Unfortunately, not every one of us gets to make the playoffs in every league, and in our dynasty leagues, maybe we're letting go of some players that were just depth, and we're looking to the future, John. How about the future? Pass rushers are hard to come by. Give us some names of some players that we can stash, looking to the future to get some sack masters.
I got 4 names here, guys, that you may look at to throw on your roster just as holdover till next year, see what happens. Steven Means with the Falcons. And the guy was a draft pick of the Bucks in 2013. Had 3 sacks over his career, 14 tackles before this season. With all the injuries and everything going on in Atlanta, he's gotten an opportunity to play. He has 19 tackles, 14 assists, and 3 sacks with 2 forced fumbles so far. And what's most important about that is that he's 9-4-3 with 2 forced fumbles over the last 3 games. Not somebody that's going to really help you a lot this year. He's got the Chargers this week and then a couple of tough matchups against Tampa Bay and Kansas City to finish up the season. But Atlanta is pretty much void of talent at the defensive end position at this point. So this guy's putting up the numbers now. He's looking pretty good. He might be somebody that carries over, maybe one of those situations where he just needed a little bit of an opportunity. Down in Jacksonville, Dwayne Smoot, 2017 third-round pick. Really has not done a heck of a lot down there. He's been playing behind some pretty good players since he's been there. He's getting a little opportunity now with Josh Allen out. He had 6 sacks last season, rather quietly. Didn't do much this year. The last 2 games with Josh Allen on IR, he's gotten an opportunity to get on field a little bit more. He has 4 tackles, assists, and 3 sacks in 2 games since Allen's been out. Smoot is one of those players that's flashed for all 3 seasons since he's been with the Jaguars, and maybe somebody that gets an opportunity to step up next year, especially since Clavon Chason has not really looked all that good. They tend to have guys though that don't really take off until the 2nd or 3rd year there in Jacksonville. I don't know if it has anything to do with system or what. We also have to consider that everything may be completely different there by next year. We may have a coaching change. With the way things are going with that team, it's hard to know what to expect going forward. But Smoot is a guy that I definitely am going to stash in a couple of my deeper leagues. Just keep my fingers crossed that he has some opportunity next year. Clelin Ferrell, however you want to pronounce it, is an early first-round pick in 2019. Hasn't really done much for 2 seasons. Had no sacks going into this past week's game. Got that matchup with the Jets and kind of blew up. 4 tackles, 2 assists, a couple sacks, definitely grabbing everybody's attention. I mean, he's actually played much better this year than what the numbers would suggest. He's been good against the run, had decent tackle numbers in several games. He's an early round pick, so the talent's there. The Raiders are definitely not going to give up on him. They're going to keep putting him on the field and giving him opportunity. This team is going to get better in general, and I think this is a guy that could be in for a breakout season next year. If everything kind of falls into place. And the last guy I'll throw out there is Josh Sweat with the Eagles. He has 20 tackles, 13 assists, 4 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. Is the 3rd wheel so far this season. He's made a handful of starts. with guys being banged up and in and out of the lineup. Brandon Graham will be 33 years old in April. He hasn't recorded a sack since week 8. Derek Barnett can't seem to stay healthy and stay on the field. Sweat's been rotating in there and playing very well at times. With those two guys, sooner or later, he's going to get the opportunity to step into that starting position, and it may come sooner with Graham getting up there. I believe Graham's either at the end of his contract this year or he may have 1 year left to go. But Sweat's a guy that I've had my eye on. In fact, I've got him as kind of a handcuff to Graham in a couple of my dynasty leagues, just waiting for Graham to hang up the cleats and move on.
I think Sweat was a lot higher rated. I mean, they got him like in the 4th round, but a lot of people had him a lot higher, and making the Eagles look smart. Not many things making the Eagles look smart this year so far, but that is one. Getting back to the now, before we get to the Guru starts and sits, Matt, let's talk about safeties. I mean, you might not have easy decisions at safety, and I can certainly attest to in the playoffs, maybe you're starting someone you haven't started all year because of trends. What are the trends going on with the Jags safeties? With Kyle Duggar, one of my favorites. Is it time? And those Cardinal safeties that we've been tracking all year.
Yeah, I knew I had to get Kyle Duggar in the notes for you, Sig.
Thank you.
Let me jump back to Cleveland Farrell.
Sure.
Because I agree with John on the upside for next year, but I also think he's usable over the next couple weeks. He had just 2 QB hits through the first 7 games this year, then had the big game against the Jets last week. He's got the Colts this week, who might still be without Anthony Costanzo at left tackle, so that's a better matchup than it seems like it should be going in. Then a rematch with the Chargers. The last time they faced the Chargers, Farrell had 4 QB hits in that game, so I think there's upside to that matchup as well. So Farrell, certainly an upside guy for next year, but also somebody who might help you over the next couple of weeks. Back at safety for the Jaguars, Josh Jones returned from IR this past week, had a chest injury, 10 tackles in his return against Minnesota. He has fallen short of 8 tackles and 6 solos just 3 times so far in his 9 games this season. He left 2 of those 3 games early. So he's had 1 game where he played the whole way and did not get at least 8 total tackles and 6 solos. So if you're in at least a balanced or even tackle-friendly league, Josh Jones is a lock-button start at this point. The other came against the Titans, who he plays this week. But that game only had 52 tackle opportunities from Tennessee for the entire Jacksonville defense. The rematch, I think, with Tennessee is better. Tennessee's 14th in total offensive plays, so I don't think they're that bad a matchup as it might look like from the first Josh Jones game. And then after that, Baltimore and Chicago are terrific matchups for DB scoring. Kyle Duggar, between 72 and 85% playing time in each of his past 4 games, decent tackle numbers, 12, 6, 4, and 6. Obviously, the 12 stands out, but the 6 is more like what we can reasonably expect. On Thursday night, though, he's got the Rams. The Rams have supplied the 4th most fantasy points to defensive backs on the season, the league's most solo tackles to DBs. So it's a good spot to take a shot on Kyle Duggar if you're considering him against other guys. Dolphins not as good a matchup for him after that, so probably not a week 15 option, but Bills in week 16 are also a top 8 scoring matchup for DBs. So a chance in deeper leagues. I'm not saying Kyle Duggar's a top 10 DB this week in the rankings, but if you're looking deep enough where you're looking for like a DB 20 type, I think that's where Kyle Duggar could really help us out this week. And then the Cardinals, Chris Banjo had 10 tackles last week, 9 of those solos. And so you're going to look at that and think that he's usable this week. But what we're going to have to watch is Jalen Thompson. Jalen Thompson was activated off of IR last week, but still turned up inactive for the game. So he didn't play. When he's healthy, he's been the starter. He has not played a whole lot this year, though, because of multiple injuries. So we're going to kind of have to try to gauge it this week. It's tough to find news on safeties. So we might get to the weekend and not really know clearly what the picture is in the Arizona backfield. I would assume at this point that Jalen Thompson is back in the starting lineup. But again, we'll have to watch and see if it's Chris Banjo again. Certainly, it's an okay spot for either guy against the Giants this week. Not as good a matchup as it was earlier in the season, but I think Daniel Jones's return would also make it a better matchup for DBs, get more tackles into their range. Do you want me to talk about the Jets, or should we just skip that team?
Well, because we had Pierre Desir to pick on. Now we don't have him. I think he got signed to a practice squad somewhere. So who do we pick on in a good way for the Jets in the secondary?
These guys are disappearing. I don't want to name them out loud because I don't want to jinx anybody. Brian Poole is done for the season. Their slot corner has been playing well. Bless Austin is on IR. Last week, they started Bryce Hall and Lamar Jackson, who are both rookies, and one of those obviously is mainly a quarterback, at outside corner spots against the Raiders. Arthur Mollett and Javelin Guidry were the third and fourth corners, kind of splitting playing time. Fortunately, neither one of them is playing enough snaps for us to look at, but Bryce Hall and Lamar Jackson are both, interesting against Seattle this week. It looks like, based on where they line up, Lamar Jackson should see the most of DK Metcalf. That makes you feel bad for him, but that could certainly help his tackle opportunities in this game. So if you're looking way down the list for a defensive back or especially a corner-specific slot, I think Lamar Jackson could be a sleeper this week. Might even run in a touchdown if he gets a Wildcat snap. And then at safety, Ashton Davis went down last week. Looks like he might miss the rest of the year with a foot injury. Bradley McDougald was already on IR, so they're down to their third safety. It's a guy that we've seen before, though, Matthias Farley, who has played for the Colts. He's played for the Raiders. We've seen him make tackles again. If I'm the Seahawks and I'm coming off an awful loss to the Giants and I'm playing a Jets defense that's starting rookies at corner and Matthias Farley as the third safety, I'm aiming for that part of the field the entire time. So we should see plenty of opportunities get into Farley's range for this one.
Russell Wilson's going to be able to call a shot.
How many of those guys you think were even on the I bet half of those guys weren't even in the program this year for the Jets if they bothered to print one.
I'm pretty sure Bryce Hall is a made-up player, or he's a Duke basketball player.
Well, and like you said, it's all about who's DK Metcalf going to posterize. Not that that's an ignoble club to be in. It was James Bradbury, at least for a play last week. For your plays this week, and believe me, I'm going to be paying attention very close. Both of these guys will probably get DMs or emails from me as we get down to second guessing ourselves, helping us not second guess ourselves. The guru and your starts and sits for week 14.
Well, the good news, Sig, is you've already picked up one of the guys that I'm going to talk about. And Kyle Duggar was on my list as well. So great minds think alike there. First guy I want to talk about is Patrick Queen against Cleveland. He's kind of been up and down, especially in the tackle columns, has some big play upside that he's shown some this year. He had 4 tackles, 4 assists, a sack, and a forced fumble in the week 1 blowout meeting of these two teams. I have to believe that the Browns are going to definitely be a better matchup this week. This second time around with the running game getting going. I like Queen to have some better tackle numbers. Whether he puts up the big plays as well, I don't know, but I think he's going to definitely get, in the 6-7 solo range this week with that matchup. Duke Riley against New Orleans. Matt talked about the running game, the massive running attack from the Saints at this point. They're definitely a run-heavy offense with all the guys falling out there. TJ Edwards is nursing a hamstring. All the guys that are on injured, so forth for the Eagles. Duke Riley is likely to be the next guy up next to Singleton. We know Singleton is somebody you definitely want to have in your lineup, but Riley could have an up opportunity as well. I'd like him to see 75 or 80% of the snaps with this situation just because they're short on anybody else to take any of those snaps away. Jesse Bates and Von Bell versus Dallas. Cincinnati's probably going to be back to Ryan Finley at quarterback, which means they will basically have zero offense. As bad as Dallas is, they should probably get up early. Ezekiel Elliott projects to have a pretty darn nice day with this defense. The linebackers situation in Cincinnati is still a mess. Bates and Bell are probably the best 2 defenders they have on the field, not named Sam Hubbard. So I expect them to have very busy days. Josh Jones has already been talked about. I like Joe Schobert, Miles Jack. Both of those guys are probably guys everybody is starting anyway. The Titans were embarrassed last week. They're going to be fired up and want to make somebody pay for after the showing that they put on last week. I expect a lot of touches for Derrick Henry and a busy day for the middle of the Jacksonville defense. Adrian Phillips, Kyle Duggar. Like Matt mentioned, the Rams have been a strong matchup for safeties. If you just look back at last week, Budda Baker and Chris Banya accounted for 19 tackles and 3 assists in that game. Phillips is kind of a hybrid safety linebacker type. Duggar's been playing mostly the strong safety position. Both of those guys have great matchups in this game, and I expect good numbers out of them. Michael Ojemudia versus Carolina. I know, Sig, you already picked him up in the league that we're in together. I think that was a very good move. Denver's top 3 corners are either injured or suspended. making a rookie their number one guy at the position this week. He had 7 solo tackles, or 7 total tackles last week. I'm sorry. As the number 2 guy in week 13. This week he'll probably step up. Don't know if DJ Moore is going to be in the lineup or not, but regardless of whoever their number 1 receiver is, Ojemudia is probably going to be the one that winds up sticking on him if they just chose to match up that way. I like Tavon Mullen and Jeff Heath versus Indianapolis this week. John Abraham and Damon Arnett are likely to be out. The Colts are a plus matchup for both corners and safeties. The defensive backs have averaged 24 tackles, 7 assists, and just slightly shy of 1 turnover per game against opposing secondaries since week 7. So I believe there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. We know the Colts don't hesitate to throw, and especially with a banged-up secondary, they're going to look to take advantage of that. Like Jeff Gladney this week, and maybe even Cameron Dantzler against Tampa Bay. Did you pick up Dantzler too, Stig?
I did. So this is why every year, I think one year when I won Red Eye Masters, I picked up 5 or 6 players of my starting 11 on defense that week. So, if it worked once, at least picking up my 2 corners for this week.
Maybe lightning will strike twice for you. Tom Brady competes a lot of short passes, which means a lot of tackle opportunity for rookie. We know that he likes to pick on rookie corners. So I like both of these guys to have plenty of opportunity and put up good tackle numbers. I don't necessarily expect any big plays out of them, but I could see both of these guys having 5 or 6 solo tackles in this game. Jaron Reed and Carlos Dunlap, if he's healthy enough, versus the Jets. The Jets have actually been protecting the quarterback a little bit better of late. But the Raiders had 3 sacks on them, and the Raiders only had 15 sacks on the season. So if that tells you kind of the state of things with the Jets at this point, I like both Reed and Dunlap, providing Dunlap gets some practice time in and is healthy enough to go. I like David Onyemata and Trey Hendrickson against the Eagles. We pretty much always hit on whoever gets a chance to rush the passer for the Eagles. Yes, Philadelphia has a new quarterback, but they still have the same offensive line this week. Onyemata has 6 sacks on the season, 3 in the last 3 games. Hendrickson has 10.5 sacks on the season. So I like both of those guys' chances of adding to their totals this week. Aldon Smith, DeMarcus Lawrence, maybe even Randy Gregory against Cincinnati. We'll touch on that one again. The Bengals' offensive line is bad. It's not going to get any better this week. They have a 3rd-string quarterback, which means that they're not going to, when they are on the field, they're going to be passing because they're going to be behind early and quite a bit probably. I would say it'll be double digits behind by the end of the first quarter. So it's going to be a lot of pass rush opportunity against a bad offensive line. Some guys I want to get out of my lineup this week. Leighton Vander Esch versus Cincinnati for a lot of the same reasons, but also because Vander Esch is just not playing very well at this point. His snap count's been down. Watching him in that game the other night, he seems slow to react. He is not as aggressive as what he has been. He's been basically like a blocking dummy out there. I mean, anybody that gets to him cuts him off before he can get to the tackle. So he's just not making the plays that we've seen him make in the past. I don't know if there's an injury involved there or what the situation is. Maybe he's just not a good fit in the defense. But either way, the combination of him not playing well, not being on the field full time, and a horrible matchup is all the reason you need to get Vander Esch out of your lineup in this game. I like Jaron Kearse I like to sit Jaron Kearse against the Packers. Even with Matt Patricia gone, the Lions can't seem to make a decision at strong safety. Kearse has at least 6 combined tackles in 4 of his 5 starts, but he's still not seeing full-time action. He's played 70% of the snaps in 2 of the last 3 games, and the Packers are a poor matchup against safeties anyway. So far, over the last, since week 9, there have been 2 safeties that have put up more than 4 solo tackles against the Packers, and nobody's put up more than 5. And it's hard to bench somebody like Fred Warner, but I'm going to seriously consider doing that against Washington if I have any decent options. Their running back situation in Washington is not good. They really don't have anybody that can run the ball between the tackles. We're going to see a lot of J.D. McKissick catching passes out in the flats and out wide, running off tackle and so forth. And I think that basically lays a good trend for Greenlaw to have some pretty good numbers and pretty good opportunity. But Warner only had 3 tackles and 3 assists this last week. Kind of saved the day for his fantasy managers with a turnover. And I don't think he's going to get that opportunity this week. Emmanuel Ogbah, the last one I'll talk about against Kansas City. And this is a guy that we've been starting pretty much every week. It's kind of hard to pull him out of your lineup if you have another option. Patrick Mahomes is just hard to get to. He's just too slick. The Chiefs are giving up less than a sack and a half per game since week 7. And Mahomes just has that magic where he has that extra sense where he feels the guy's coming and gets away from everybody. So I'm going to set Ogbah this week.
Plus, he has the insurance agent around him all the time now.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
And
Jake
how
from
about
State Farm's going, look out.
Yeah. He's got he definitely has something unfair, and Josh Allen's arm was unfair when he strafed Fred Warner and threw that one right over his head and surprised him. You should not be surprised every week. The great content that you get from John Norton and the IDP team at footballguys.com. Matt Schauf, Draft Sharks, the very professional. We have to up our game now. I mean, I just got my stuff decorated back here. I added some stuff too. CC Salami over my shoulder there. I haven't showed you all the posters.
We need to send Joe a message and have him send us some stuff like that, Sig.
Yeah. Well,
some Football Guys backdrops.
So I'll do the official. I'm gonna have to put this up on my wall. And since you, I think he was a Raider. If you remember this, I won this in a drawing. I don't know if you all can see this. This is the Morton Anderson sexy kicker. He signed it for me. We did a hoot out though. So that's going to be going up on the wall too. So that's going to be my answer. That's how I'm going to try to out-professional you. Morton Anderson Hall of Fame.
It's not a very professional backdrop now.
Yeah.
Next week, I'm going to wear the mesh shirt that he's wearing.
Exactly. If he can pull it off, So everybody, thanks for joining us as always. Thanks for playing IDP Fantasy Football, the best fantasy football. It'll make you a better fantasy football player, a better football watcher and talker, like we get to do here every week for you. It's a great privilege and pleasure. We'll be back helping you through week 16. Get your championship, folks. As always, we want to help you do that because you're so very classy.